listener production.
Hey, Tara Cassidy with you and welcome to The Briefing. Does a glass of red wine a day keep the doctor away? Does coffee help you burn fat? And do artificial sweeteners increase your risk of diabetes? Just about every second week we're getting spruiked new research, often conflicting with earlier studies and dividing experts online.
So you'd be hard-pressed to get ethics approvals for such a study. And so I guess what it does mean is you have to use the evidence along with the rest of the evidence base and make a decision about, are these drinks good? Should we be telling people to drink them less often?
So how do us regular Joes who don't work in science or academia know what's credible and what to believe? That's coming up in the second half of this episode. First though, let's get into the headlines with Helen Smith. It's Thursday, the 14th of August.
Hey Tara, and to you listening, the Coalition has slammed PM Anthony Albanese for his decision to recognise a state of Palestine, saying in doing so he has emboldened the terrorist group Hamas. The group's October 7 attack on Israel triggered the current conflict in Gaza and has applauded the move, saying it, quote, reflects a growing global awareness of the necessity to end the injustice suffered by our peoples for decades. It's now called on the government to take further action by putting pressure on Israel to stop its plans to occupy Gaza.
Meanwhile, Shadow Foreign Minister Michaelia Cash says the PM should hang his head in shame over the move, saying all Australians should be appalled at the massive propaganda victory Mr Albanese has handed Hamas on a platter, while opposition leader Susan Lee says the PM is out of his depth.
If you've got a listed terrorist organisation cheering on your foreign policy, it might be time to admit that you got it wrong.
In response, the federal government has condemned Hamas for seeking to manipulate facts for their own propaganda. Now, it comes after earlier this week, Anthony Albanese announced Australia would recognise Palestine at the United Nations next month, joining more than 140 countries, which is around 3/4 of the UN membership, who already recognise a Palestinian state.
In the announcement, the federal government says Hamas will be excluded from the process and that one of his preconditions for recognition was having no governance role to Hamas. The coalition has since vowed to revoke recognition of Palestine if it wins in the next election.
Netflix star Matt Wright's trial will hear from more witnesses today after explosive evidence from the now paraplegic pilot involved in the fatal 2022 crash about how Wright visited him in hospital in the weeks after and asked him to manipulate his flight records. Yesterday, Sebastian Robinson told the Northern Territory Supreme Court after the crash that killed their friend and co-star Chris Willow Wilson, Wright visited him at a Brisbane hospital and asked him to change his flight hours to look like his helicopter had done more trips and the crashed helicopter had done less. Now, Mr Robinson says at the time he said he'd think about it, but later told Wright he didn't want to do it.
He also told the court he saw Matt Wright go through his phone and delete things, including what he believed to be notes detailing trips. During cross-examination, pilot Sebastian Robinson was also questioned about whether he lied to investigators about the aircraft's records in the weeks after the crash, which he admitted, saying he was in a bad way and panicked.
Yeah, the court heard Robinson first told the Australian Transport Safety Bureau that the helicopter's maintenance records were clean when, in fact, there were many issues. Now, Matt Wright is facing several charges related to lying in a police interview, attempting to doctor flight records and asking another person to burn a helicopter maintenance record, all of which he's denied.
Pressure is mounting on the Commonwealth Bank to repay more than 2 million low-income customers $270 million in fees after recording its biggest profit ever, $10.25 billion. It was up 4% from the previous year, giving shareholders a bumper $2.60 payout per share. And because of the standout results, there's been a push for the banking giant to pay back millions of customers after the corporate watchdog last year found it and 3 other big banks had charged high fees to people entitled to low-fee accounts.
Yeah, and that led to CommBank having to hand out goodwill payments of $25 million to nearly 90,000 customers. But just last month, ASIC announced announced it would still need to make additional refunds, which CommBank declined, saying at the time the fees were disclosed to the customers, which rude. I don't think that cuts it. That would probably be because Helen, people assume that the banks are doing the right thing and telling them the fees that they're meant to be paying. Now, while CommBank's saying no to this, it says it is cracking down, though, on fossil fuel giants like Glencore and BHP, who it says won't be allowed to borrow from the bank unless they commit to reaching net zero emissions by 2050.
And that was stated in its 2025 annual report, where the bank also updated its environment and social policies, revealing it would impose those further climate requirements on coal mining clients, which is a big move because about $1.2 billion of CommBank's finance is involved with the thermal coal industry in that year, with experts saying the changes will make it harder for these companies to borrow.
We give teenagers a lot of heat for being on their phones all the time, but it turns out they're not the ones we should be worrying about, with new research finding the country's biggest phone addicts are actually young men. The Swinburne University study found men aged 18 to 40 spent the most time glued to their phones than any other age group, more than 6 hours a day. And that's whether it be scrolling socials, watching videos, or listening to streaming apps. Now, according to that survey of over 520 Victorian adults about their phone habits, those under the age of 40 are twice as likely to become dependent on their devices.
Yeah, and that includes adults with no kids more than those with children, men more than women, and students. So we're talking about uni and TAFE here as the highest consumers. Tara, is this really surprising though? As much as it is depressing, part of that group includes, Gen Z who grew up in the digital age with devices and social media. And I can't speak. I'm glued to my phone. We use it every day, especially for work. So it's concerning, but considering we know the harms associated with phone use, the part of the problem is it's so addictive, with algorithms contributing to that. As we've seen, that research shows that it's not just being on your phone and doom scrolling, but reels and other short videos, particularly they're saying, also impacts our mental health and our attention spans, because it's basically just a constant dopamine release and it's rewiring our brains that we constantly need this stimulation. So I think you and I probably both need a phone detox, and Australia maybe should get a national phone detox day.
An Aussie teen chasing his NFL dream overseas has gone viral for a tearful message about his family and being homesick that's warmed the hearts of Aussies right across the country. Victorian teen Archie Wilson's currently a freshman at the University of Nebraska and broke down during a press conference when a reporter asked him about his family.
Yeah, that part's hard. I mean, I'm sorry. Yeah, I love them a lot. I got two little brothers and a mum and dad, and that's the tough part about being here. I love them a lot and I miss them. But it's, they know this is what's best for me, and it's good. I can still talk to them plenty over the phone, and they're coming here to see the first few games, so I'm looking forward to that.
Aww.
So refreshing to see healthy masculinity and a man actually crying. I love that video so much. The 18-year-old has been over in the States as part of an Oz Pro Kick program that has seen Australia produce a number of successful NFL punters before, including those that have gone on to play for the Seattle Seahawks, the 49ers, and the Chicago Bears. And apparently, Archie's chances of landing his NFL dream career are up there, with coaches saying his AFL skills and ability to kick with both feet was impressive, saying he could watch Archie punt all day and that he's never seen anything like it. So go Archie.
What a beautiful story. And they're not wrong about Aussies producing some great NFL players. Fun fact, I used to play gridiron at the same club where Jesse the Monster Williams played in Brisbane at the Bayside Ravens, and he went on to be a defensive tackle for the Seattle Seahawks. Seahawks, and then there's Jordan Mailata of the Philadelphia Eagles, who's another one who just became the first Aussie earlier this year to actually play and win a Super Bowl.
Yes, bringing those AFL skills, which I love, to America. So, yay! Now, that brings our headlines to a close for today. Coming up is your deep dive, Tara, looking into a recent study about artificial sweeteners that's divided opinions online and how on earth we can know what to believe. Have a listen to that coming up next.
Consuming artificially sweetened drinks might not be the healthier option. According to Australian researchers, they increase the risk of diabetes by almost 40%.
As to why, researchers say it's in the body's reaction to artificial sweetener.
The relationship between artificially sweetened beverages and type 2 diabetes was independent of weight gain, which suggests that there are other mechanisms such as changes in microbiome or insulin secretion or glucose metabolism.
In recent weeks, this study by Monash and RMIT Unis and Cancer Council Victoria looking into artificial sweeteners got widespread coverage in the Australian media. It was led by researchers including Distinguished Professor Dr. Barbara de Curtin from the RMIT School of Health and Biomedicine, a specialist physician at the Department of Diabetes and Vascular Medicine at Monash Health. She's received an OAM medal for her medical research, has done a PhD in epidemiology of diabetes, and is considered one of, if not the leading expert in the area of insulin resistance and type 2 diabetes in Australia. However, despite that, the studies received some criticism from corners of the nutrition and fitness space online, who've questioned the strength of the study's findings.
The data they're referring to was an observational study, which means the participants in the study likely just had an unhealthy lifestyle. They didn't control for just diet soda. There's 0% chance that diet soft drinks cause obesity.
And it's not the first time studies about artificial sweeteners have had critics, including from other experts in the health and fitness space.
In human, randomized, controlled trials, substituting diet drinks for sugar-sweetened beverages produces weight loss. It's very clear, very consistent.
So how do us regular folk tell scientific fact from fiction when we're constantly being fed conflicting info online? Here to help us unpack that today is Dr. Evangeline Mancioris from Dietitians Australia, the nation's peak body and leading voice for nutrition and dietetics, Director of Nutrition and Food Science at the Uni of South Australia, and an accredited dietitian of close to 40 years. Dr. Mancioris, thanks so much for joining me on the briefing today. This study and its findings about artificial sweeteners, what's your take on it?
Yeah, look, this sort of study that was done by the Monash Group is an observational study. So what it means is they observe people over a period of time, get them to report all different aspects of their diet, and then look to see what health conditions they have at the end of a certain period of time. And in this case, what they did was looked at the intake of sugar-sweetened beverages. So that's things like, soft drinks made with sugar, as opposed to those that are sweetened with artificially sweetened products. And what they did show was that both led to an increase in diabetes, but I guess what it's showing is even that low-level, small, consistent intake can be problematic. And I think this evidence needs to be considered with the type of study it is. As we said, that is an observational study. And observational studies are normally done when you want answers to questions and trying to get the answers quickly to guide public health and public health policy. But they don't always prove cause and effect compared to, say, for example, a randomised control trial where a group of experimenters would intervene and give people a can of either sugar-sweetened soft drink a day or a can of artificially sweetened soft drink for a day over a period of time. Now, as you can imagine, you can only do that for a short time if you did it as an actual experiment. Most studies would last 3 or 4 months. It would be great if we could do them for longer, but you can imagine the difficulty and also the cost involved in doing an intervention study for such a long period of time where you get good data about what happens over a lifetime of consumption. And so this is where observational studies come in. They don't say that, yes, it directly caused it, because there are many other things that could have done it, and we're not tightly controlling, we're not doing anything, we're just observing people. In an experimental study, you're able to tightly control what people are doing and make the only change in their diet that can of soft drink. In an observational study, we can't do that. So it gives us different sorts of evidence. And I think that's the really difficult bit to understand. And you've got to pull it all together. And so when we do have an observational study, we look at how good the quality of the study is. So how well did they record things? Was it self-reported? Was the diagnosis of the diabetes from a doctor and all that sort of stuff?
Now, that actually answers part of my next question, because part of the criticism of this study was over the method that was used, and because it didn't use the gold standard of medical research, which is human randomised control trials, which you mentioned, and the nuance about it being an observational study and not being able to show cause and effect wasn't reflected in media coverage. Is that a concern when it comes to communicating medical research to the public?
That's a tricky one because it is concerning, but the reality is I don't think we're going to ever have a randomised controlled trial that will go for long enough to be able to pick up if people get diabetes from it, for a couple of reasons. Firstly, that no one's going to want to do it for that long, right? And have to fill in diet diaries for that long and report to someone for that long and not change any other aspect of their diet for that long. But the other issue is that would an ethics committee allow it? Because giving someone a can of soft drink every day is unhealthy. So you'd be hard-pressed to get ethics approvals for such a study. And so I guess what it does mean is you have to use the evidence along with the rest of the evidence base and make a decision about, are these drinks good? Should we be telling people to drink them less often? There's other foods that, like salami, that we've got data from observational studies that it increased the risk of bowel cancer. It's good quality data for an observational study, but we're never going to have a randomised controlled trial on it now because no ethics committee would allow you, with that level of background observational data, to put someone on processed meat for 10 years. And it's the same with artificially sweetened drinks and sugar sweetened drinks. We understand some of the biological process to go, yeah, it kind of makes sense why that happens. The other area is breastfeeding. Like no one is ever going to do a randomised controlled trial to compare whether breastfeeding is better than formula feeding because no ethics committee would ever allow you to do that. So sometimes we are stuck with that observational data and we just have to make it as good quality as possible. And then that gets the information out to people a lot quicker so they can make changes. And I think if we think of something like that most recently, and I hate to go back to it, but it's COVID. A lot of the health information about COVID was based on observation. Okay, we know that if people get together, it spreads really, really quickly. It spreads more quickly than other, viruses do. So that was all observational information that could be given up straight away to inform public health and to try to get people to be as healthy as possible.
For the everyday person, it can become difficult when on one hand you have studies coming out making connections between just about everything you touch and see these days and having adverse health outcomes, and then they get covered by the media, it's everywhere on social media. For example, this particular one about artificial sweeteners, even the World Health Organization says it doesn't recommend artificial sweeteners. But then on the other hand, you've got other experts who come out and kind of question the validity of and take these kinds of stances. How is the everyday person meant to cut through that and know what's true?
It is very difficult, isn't it? It is very difficult. It's very confusing. And you're right, it appears conflicting the whole time. You look at one thing, it says, yes, it's okay. You look at another thing and says, no, it's not okay. Listening to podcasts like this is going to help, right? Where information is sort of, discussed and the whole story is presented. As you said, WHO came out and also indicated that taking artificial sweeteners wasn't useful for reducing your risk of diabetes and heart disease. And so that goes, okay, that's a major health organisation that's put out a release once again from that study that was done. They had randomised controlled trials in that, short-term ones though, as well as long-term observational studies. And it was the same things that came up there. So as researchers and as people that give information out to the public, you like to see a lot of data all heading in the same direction before you tell people that this is an important thing to change in their diet or to try to change. And once again, I think when it comes to food and diet, we need to think carefully about isolated bits of information about one particular food when you're considering your whole diet. So if I had someone here who adhered to the Australian dietary guidelines, ate their 5 veggies a day, ate their fruit, didn't eat anything else that was considered junk food or, discretionary food, and their one joy was having a can of artificially sweetened soft drink, that isn't as big a problem as someone who may be consuming donuts, pies and pasties, lots of lollies, lots of potato chips, all those sorts of things, and what that does together. So it's looking at the whole diet. And this is why this health information is important, because it gives you information which you can then make decisions about what you do with your diet. So you go, okay, well, given I don't have a family history of it, I'm not carrying excess weight, I exercise regularly, and it's about the only, junk food that I consume, it's not as big a problem with me, and I think I'm willing to carry that risk. And I think that's how people should interpret it, looking at their whole diet.
What would you say needs to be done differently, if you think, in this space when it comes to whether it be research or the way that research is communicated to the public?
It would be great if there was more science literacy in schools, taught by, people that have good knowledge of it in the background. Wouldn't it be great, though, if we could legislate against influencers? Never going to happen. But, I think influencers have to seriously think about what they're saying, who they're saying it to, and for what reason. So often it's like, well, I do this and I feel great. They may be doing it because they're being paid to say that. There are a lot of good podcasts that dissect that nutrition information and also dissect other science information that people can look for to fully understand what it's about. There's also really credible websites that analyse the information. There's individual ones by, scientists and researchers, and sometimes you will get differences on interpretation. So we are human too, and we do interpret the data with our own concerns and considerations for what's happening in the world and what we see.
So look for the nuance and don't get your medical advice from influencers or other people with credentials. It seems pretty sound advice to me.
Absolutely.
Dr. Mancioras, thanks very much for joining me on the briefing today.
Thanks.
That was Uni of South Australia Director of Nutrition and Food Sciences, Dr. Evangeline Mancioras, speaking with me there. And that's it for this episode of The Briefing. If you found this ep interesting, don't forget to leave us a comment or a review, or you can check us out on Instagram at The Briefing Podcast. I'm Tara Cassidy. See you next time.
Listener.